Hey, stargazers, we're going to start this video off with power to the people. So Los Angeles is really holding it down right now. And unless you've been living under a rock in a cave on a mountaintop where there's no access to the outside world except for goats, you've also been watching this comedy. It would be funnier if this were happening to somebody else. With Musk and Trump, breaking up, right? Now, there are major considerations with this that I'm not going to get into here. But for those of you who are paying attention to more than, the salient details, we know that there's some huge issues here. I mean, the people we have in charge of counterterrorism, he's a 22-year-old boy with no experience. He was an intern before this. And Hegseth, the drunken rapist, and Musk having all this data he's collected, and also apparently being tied into multiple arms of national security and national security issues, including NASA. This is the Trump-Musk breakup is, and also because Trump being who he is, this is bad. This is really bad, and it's terrifying because we are so exposed and so vulnerable right now. Which I suppose that it's okay if you convince yourself that Russia is your motherland, even like your your mother from another planet kind of thing or whatever, and you're just believing that Russia loves Americans and they love white Americans and they're going to love having you. I mean, listen, if that's your jam and you need to believe this, let me not be the person to help you check into reality. But I'm just saying for the rest of us, this is not good. This is so not good. Anyway, but we knew that. For those of us who've been paying attention, we knew that. Now, we've got a couple of major aspects going on this month. And of course, one of the things, because right now, I don't know about you, but I am just overloaded. My outrage button is broken. I'm so many things. I literally don't have the patience or the wherewithal to deal with more drum banging, right? And sound the alarm, especially from astrologers. Bless their heart, they're doing a much better job than I am based on subscriber count. But I'm saying I can't listen to more people go on and on and on about how this is the big one. Oh my God, it's the big earth changing, life changing. This is the month. They've been saying this for over 3 years. Every time there's a major planetary shift, it's the big, theatrical, whoa, and then when it does matters, I'm not hearing a whole lot about that being discussed, right? So that kind of like slips under the radar. So, and now, of course, June is no exception. Of course, everyone's like, oh, this is the game changer. So here's the thing. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The more important thing is that this has been building for a couple of years now. This is not an overnight sensation. And I guess maybe that's the thing I want to share with you guys. Maybe, help you if your adrenals feel like literally Congo drums people are beating on these days with all their their alarming predictions. This has been a wave, it has been a wave that has been building and building and building. So everything that we're seeing is literally the wave moving up, like, you see waves in the ocean, right? So this is not new. This is not new. So all we can do in situations like this is be the best surfers and swimmers and survivalists that we can and ride this wave out, right, in ways that make the most sense so that we have the least amount of damage when it's done. So with that said, here's your surf advisory for the month of June. So the first thing we know, Saturn and Neptune have moved into Aries, right? They're both at the very beginning of Aries. And remember, we talked about that. Saturn and Neptune conjunct in Aries are this combination, Saturn and Neptune, regardless of sign, is the architect, okay? So when it comes to design and engineering and visionary plans, that we have the ability and skills and wherewithal to plan on paper so that we can actually execute this like an architect. That's Saturn and Neptune together. It can be a whole lot of other stuff, don't get me wrong. There's a whole lot of downsides to Saturn and Neptune because Saturn is tedious and forces you to be responsible and accountable for your actions and take ownership of your decisions, right? Which nobody's ever a fan of, especially when they were not the best decisions. I'm just as guilty. And Neptune, of course, has all sorts of downsides astrologers love to go on and on and on about. But together, on the upside, got to look for the upsides here, right? Got to look for the signs. Saturn and Neptune combined together is the combination of the architect, which means that on a very large scale, mass consciousness, esoteric level, this is a time when we are in a position to be the architects of our destiny. Go Los Angeles. Power to the people. Okay, so that's challenging, right? That's challenging because it's in Aries too. Now, the thing about it is with Aries, we can look at it one of two ways. Aries is the infant of the zodiac, right? So it screams the loudest. It's the most selfish. It's the most self-absorbed because that's what infants do. That's a survival skill. Okay, which is not all bad. We also know that Aries is courageous and brave and optimistic and confident. And let me tell you, you cannot be courageous and brave without also being optimistic and confident. Because if you weren't optimistic and confident in an outcome, you wouldn't be able to move forward. So the presence of Aries so strong like this is an indication also that part of being the architect of our future has to do with recognizing bravery and courage. And with that means that this is an inside job. We got to pull it out from inside of ourselves. We have to find reasons to be optimistic and confident that the future is what we can make of it, not what other people are hoisting down our throats. Okay? And that means sometimes you're going to have to do the uncomfortable thing and you're going to have to speak up. Because this wave that's been building all these years has been built on both us not paying attention. We fell asleep at the wheel, stopped paying attention to the kids, right? And you know what happens. 5 minutes of not paying attention to those kids, suddenly there's silence, there's problems. So it's the same thing. There's been a whole lot going on in the background because nobody was paying attention or took it seriously. At the same time, what has also been happening is a whole lot of people have been doing what they always do, which is not saying a word. Not saying a word. You know who these people are around you that say and support and reinforce the most heinous, ugly, wrong, and damaging things about other people and other cultures, right? And even women or men, right? You know these people, you hear them, they're the loud ones. They just love the sound of their own voice. And they're quick to let you know why their opinion is the right one. Podcasting is a classic example of what we're dealing with here with these people who have, like the Joe Rogans, right? So absolutely convinced of his rightness that he can't see any other way. And the thing about it is Joe Rogan will eventually admit that he's wrong. I will give him that. But in the meantime, there's a whole lot of people who are taking everything he says with such incredible confidence and conviction that is the only way to see the world, even when it's clearly very wrong. But in our personal lives, we're surrounded by these people and we're, trying to keep the peace. So we keep our mouth shut. So when Uncle Bill starts going on and on and on about those damn black people, blah, blah, blah. And, Aunt Susie's like, oh my God, did you hear about those Mexican rapists that Uncle Trump was talking about? When you hear the weirdos talking about Daddy Trump, like, oh, wow, there's a Freudian, freaking file right there. God damn. If I had to pick a daddy, he wouldn't be it. You hear these people and you say absolutely nothing. You say absolutely nothing because you're trying to keep the peace. What it really is we're being cowards. Because if you think about it, when we're dealing with children, it doesn't take much for children to hear and being reinforced over and over and over again. You can't say that and you can't do that. Stop that. No, you can't ask that question. That's rude. Stop it. Right? We're quick to show children and remind children what is and isn't acceptable public social behavior. And there's reasons for it. Because those are the things that make life easier for everybody so we can all kind of get along long enough to get through whatever and get back to the safety and privacy of our homes, where inside your own home, you can say whatever you want. But out here in the street, when we're surrounded by everybody else, the polite society requires that sometimes we check ourselves and we keep our biases, in our back pocket where they belong. Right. And there's been a whole bunch of people, we call them Karens now, right? Karens and Chads. There's a whole bunch of people who've been letting since who got elected, who's basically given them a permission slip to be their worst selves and to let all their ugly biases come to the forefront and lead the way in terms of their speech and their actions. You can't help people like that, right? Listen, you can't fix stupid and you can't fix hateful. That's an inside job. But we do have the ability to point out when it comes up, dude, that's not okay. That's not okay. You can't, you can think that I can't stop you from thinking that, but you can't say that, and leave it at that. You don't have to get into a long discussion. We've all dropped the ball. And now is the time we all need to gird our loins and speak up gently and firmly and politely, but remind people, if that's what you think, I can't control your thoughts, but you can't say that out loud, and you can't continue reinforcing that here, right? But listen, it's your life. You do what you want, right? And if you have the luxury of not being personally impacted by the threat, of being deported to some strange country where you don't even speak the language, you don't have any family, you don't have any money, you literally have no resources and no way of getting out of there, right? Then that's good for you. Lucky you, right? So when you think about when you're at your job, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm surrounded by Trump supporters at my job and I just couldn't say anything. Right. But these are also the same people who will not join a protest. By the way, I have a No Kings protest coming up on the 14th. They will not join a protest. They will do nothing. They will do nothing except wring their hands, as a sign of like a moral outrage. When the reality is the moral outrage and moral standing has absolutely no value if there's no backbone behind it. What the Quaker say, when you pray, move your feet. So, and listen, the world is full of cowards. The world is full of cowards. Run away, run away. What is it? Survive long enough to live another day, right? But that doesn't make it okay. And Saturn and Neptune conjunct in Aries is really going to drive home the importance of having the courage to speak up, right? And take a position and have a conviction, right? Not just the hateful handful out here. Which, by the way, in case you missed it, we've got a bunch of sociopaths in Congress. And I'm not saying this as a joke. I'm saying this for real. Because apparently this big, beautiful bill that passed through the House of Representatives, now that everybody's finally actually reading it, I mean, hi, this is what we pay them to do. This is their job, to read this stuff. We don't have the time to read, and we don't have the legal background to understand. That's their job. That's why we elected them. You had one job, Bubba, one job. Anyway, so now we're finding out that mixed into this bill, among many things that were mixed into this bill that had nothing to do with budget reconciliation, some horse's ass, and they still won't give up his name, put in a request or requirement for tax exemptions for, ready? Gun silencers. So if you bought a gun silencer, you got a tax break for it. What kind of sociopath even thinks this is okay? We don't have gun control laws, but sure, let's add in a thing where now people can put silencers on their gun too. This is the kind of nonsense that slipped into this bill. And this is a lot of the problem. There's a whole lot in here that's wrong. In the meantime, this whole bill also is obviously about reducing and taking away Medicare and Medicaid from as many people as possible. But sure, let's give a tax break on silencers. Oh my God. You got to speak up. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to fight. You don't have to argue. You don't have to be violent. But you do need to put a period on the end of the sentence and speak up and say it as firmly and politely as you can. You can think whatever you want. I can't control what you're thinking, but that you shouldn't be saying out loud because that's not acceptable, right? And that's it. If you want to get into a long discussion about it, you can, but ultimately you have to remind people, not here, you don't. You want to say stuff like that out loud, you got to go home, right? You say whatever you want inside your house, but out here with us, you have to play by the rules of polite society. So Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Now, as this month starts out, because today is the 8th, tomorrow's the 9th. Now, tomorrow on Monday, Mercury will go to 0 Cancer. And just shortly, like a day or two after that, Jupiter will go into 0 Cancer. So Mercury and Jupiter will both be setting off this Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So some things that I would expect to see, in case you were wondering, some things that I would expect to see with the Mercury-Jupiter squaring Saturn-Neptune is definitely a lot of reconsideration. Remember this word, reconsideration, about the plans and the architecture, the design, right? The architectural design of this thing, whatever we have implemented. So this not only goes for the people at the top that are literally trying to destroy the country and take us backward in time, but also on a micro level in our personal lives. You may find yourself really reevaluating the architecture and the design, the plan that you had for how you want to move your life forward. Now, it is okay to be unsure and only to know that whatever you're working with right now isn't working. That's okay. The most important thing is that we're taking the time out to recognize what's happening, and that is that we have to reconsider the plans that we were moving forward in our life with and be open to bigger, better, and unexpected things. So with this particular combination, with Mercury, Jupiter, and Cancer squaring Saturn and Neptune, it's a lot. The best image I have for you is a lot like a shell breaking, an eggshell breaking, right? So the shell is breaking, right? There's cracks in the shell is breaking, and things are opening up, and there's something about to be born from this. This is where we're at right now. So, and typically when baby chicks and baby birds, when animals are first born and come out of that shell, they're not pretty. They're not pretty. They're messy. And you're literally looking at this thing going, how is this going to turn into something fantastic looking? And it always does. But for right now, for this month, there's a lot of reconsideration about the plans we were moving forward with. And don't be surprised if there's a whole lot of major hiccups. Now, what I would also look for is there's the possibility that tech stuff, technology is going to get some hits. I don't know what's going on in terms of cosmology. I mean, maybe there's big solar flares or something happening. So if you guys know, definitely let me know. But look for interruptions and big news where technologies are concerned, and certainly some failed attempts at starting things they're just going to fall through. They're just going to fall through. Like they're going to fall apart as quickly as they were put together. So it's going to be the middle of the month is going to be interesting. I'm not going to lie. The middle of the month is going to be interesting because while this is happening, while Mercury and Jupiter have moved into Cancer starting tomorrow, the 9th, and set up this set up this square to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. We've got about a week of this before Mars finally leaves Leo. Okay, so Mars in Leo is really inflaming the energy, right? Because Mars loves being in Leo. Mars loves a good fight, and Leo loves theater, right? So there's a whole lot of big drama, big hair drama, baby, happening this week. So I would look for that between the 9th and the 18th. Yeah, about 9 days, give or take. So, keep her cool. Try to be as sweet and polite as possible. You know the old saying, butter wouldn't melt in your mouth because there's never a hot word that comes out of it. Like, try to be as diplomatic as possible, even when you're making it a point to remind people, this is a polite society. You can think whatever you want, but you can't say that out loud out here. Okay. With Mars and Leo, it's just going to further inflame and infuriate and whip people up like they were already whipped up. It's just reaching crescendo. Now, what will happen is around the 18th, Mercury will go into Virgo, or not Mercury, Mars will go into Virgo. So cooler heads will prevail. Of course, by the time we get to Mars and Virgo, a lot of the dust should have settled. And what you see is what you get. Now, that's going to be the 18th, which, if I'm not mistaken, here in the United States, they're having this ridiculous military parade on the 14th. So it'll be a few days after that when the dust settles and, people come back to their right minds. And by the way, in case you're unaware, one of the major issues and follies of this military parade down in DC is those tanks weigh literally tons. Those DC roads were not built to handle or accommodate tanks rolling through the streets. So they're literally going to destroy the roads and the streets in DC if they try to drive these things through, because we don't have enough now that we're adding to our tab that we're going to have to pay for later. Oh my God. Anyway, now when Mars goes into Virgo, so here's the thing, it's good and bad. When Mars goes into Virgo, there's a couple of things that happen. So the first thing, when Mars is in Virgo, sense of humor goes out the window. So, and I know for many of us, our sense of humor has already flown the coop, and we haven't seen it in years. I don't remember the last time I thought anything was funny. Until Musk and Trump got into a fight. Anyway, Mars and Virgo, while they're not humorless, they also have very dry sense of humor. And they're also practical jokers. So Mars and Virgo is a very specific kind of humor, but it's not by its nature very carefree and light and, throwing caution to the wind like Mars and Leo would be. Mars and Leo loves a party. Mars and Virgo is thinking about how much we're going to have to clean up after this. right? During the party. So there's that. Now with Mars and Virgo also too, like in a natal chart, you'll find that people with Mars and Virgo tend to be perfectionists, and they're problem solvers, which is fantastic. Listen, you don't want a surgeon who's not a perfectionist and a problem solver. You don't want a rocket engineer who's not a perfectionist and a problem solver. You don't want someone in charge of payroll who's not a perfectionist and a problem solver. So there are good reasons we love Mars and Virgo. And typically it's all the things we don't think about because they keep life running smoothly until there's a problem. Then we're like, oh my God, right? Then you miss that Mars and Virgo. But the problem is with Mars and Virgo, that also means that they can be persnickety and picky and very like a surgeon's knife, very specific and cut to the bone, with accuracy. So when Mars moves into Virgo, we can expect people to really take a focused lens to look at things and say, we're not liking this, and this is why, and this is the list, bullet list, complete with citations and everything else. You don't want to mess with Mars and Virgo. And this is what we're having while Mercury and Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune have all been doing this dance. Now, about this time, when Mars enters Virgo around the 18th or 19th, Mercury will have moved away, thank God, from that Saturn Neptune enough to give us some breathing space, right? So we're not going to be quite so like, as this happens, but we'll still be there. We'll still be there. We're very sensitive, very sensitive. However, Jupiter will still remain in square to Saturn and Neptune. So there's the challenge is going to be that with Jupiter squaring Saturn and Neptune, there's a temptation to blow things out of proportion, as if we didn't have enough of that before the 19th when Mars is in Leo. But this will continue. This will continue. And you've got Mars in Virgo. So imagine Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune is like this balloon that you're blowing up as big as you can, and Mars in Virgo is the pin that's going to come along and pop the balloon. Okay, so this is the kind of energy we're getting as we finish out the month. For you personally, what this means is that it's not going to be a simple thing. So just when you think you've gotten the answers right and you figured it out and this is how we're going to do it, and okay, we recalibrated and reconsidered, we changed our plans, and this is what we're going to do, like you're going to find like, nope, there's a catch. That's not going to work because of this. And if you do that, that's not going to work because of that. So everything's going to come with its own caveats, right? Or second considerations as far as why it will not be as simple as we would like it to be. Now, as we end out the month, the sun, let me rephrase it, sorry, 19th, 21st. So the 19th through 21st is when we've got this thing when Mars goes into Virgo. Now, at the same time, the sun will be moving. This just makes more of what we don't want. So the sun will have moved into Cancer, and the sun will be setting up a square to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And what that will show us between 19th and 21st, as soon as Mars gets into Virgo and that sun goes into Cancer around the 21st, like it's going to illuminate exactly what's wrong with this plan, right? So you won't have any worries about not being sure where you need to fix things. Oh, it'll be there, in your face there. Like you won't have any choice but to face the reality of the stuff we're dealing with or not working with, right? So it'll be necessary, uncomfortable but necessary. But it can also, in theory, if we keep our eyes on our prize kids, it could, in theory, point us to a much bigger, better vision, right? So try not to let your disappointment get a hold of you and put you in a stranglehold of cynicism. Hang on to whatever happens between the 19th and 21st that really blows up and exposes where the weaknesses and the problems are. And understand that at the same time, if you look, literally all you have to do is change your focus. It's all about perspective. There's an answer, there's a solution there that's going to show us the better way out of this forest, right? So don't get lost in don't lose sight of the forest for the trees. Keep your eyes open and consider changing your focus, your perspective if you find you're overwhelmed with all the things that are not going to work. Because the answer there, we just sometimes need to look this way instead of that way. Okay. Now, as we get to the end of the month, it's such a fun month. Yay, team. Uranus will be at 29 Taurus. Now, Uranus has been approaching 29 Taurus all month. Right? It is in the final degrees. So, I'm not going to belabor that point, but I will say that when we get to the end of the month with Uranus at 29 Taurus and Venus in Virgo, Venus not Virgo, Venus is in 26 Taurus. So by the time we get to the end of the month, we should have some surprises. I know as if the world has not been surprising and shocking enough. But there may be some upsets or surprises of huge import that are going to be game changers when the dust settles after this. So keep an eye on your money. Try not to go into debt for things if you can help it. Obviously, and you don't need an astrologer to tell you that. We've been watching this for over a year now. But understand that at the end of the month may come some things that are particular, that are setting things up for particularly dicey walking of the path as we move forward through summer. But the end of the month should reveal what exactly we're dealing with, right? Middle to end of the month. So that's what I have to say. So don't panic, don't be alarmed. And all these Johnny come lately astrologers are like, oh my God, this is the month that changes everything. Well, maybe, I don't know, but I've been hearing it from them for so long. I'm just like, whatever, right? Whatever. I'm thinking of a couple of really, really successful YouTube astrologers that are really, really big at sounding the alarms at every opportunity. So I'm trying not to name names. Golly day. And also, in case you didn't know, here's an interesting factoid for you. Did you know that a majority of people who follow astrology on YouTube are MAGA supporters? Honest to God, I don't know what that's about, except that maybe it's because they're all illiterate and they don't like to read. I don't know. But also, too, like we've got so many mouth breathers out here claiming to be astrologers that are like sounding the alarms at every opportunity. These guys are always looking for excitement. So maybe that's it, too. But that was an interesting factoid you guys might want to know about, or not, as the case may be. Okay, so that's it. Hang on to July. We just got to get to July. And we'll see what happens because it's in July that the tables turn. So for the most part, like as best you can, enjoy the entertainment this month. Because remember, we're getting it for free. We don't even have to pay for Netflix to watch this. Wow. And this would be so much better if it were happening to somebody else. But I guess it's our turn. And it is now also our turn to stand up and stand for something. And like I said, you don't have to be violent. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be argumentative. But literally, when you're dealing with people and we know who they are, who are out of pocket and out of line publicly, literally deal with them like you would deal with a small child, right? And politely remind them what is expected of them in public in polite society. And if you're having trouble seeing them as small children and being that gracious, remember most of the time, 90% of these particular problematic personalities have the minds of children. So, in here, they hold the brains as a little kid. So that's it. Hang in there. If you have any questions or whatever, certainly feel free to put it in the comment box. I am really trying desperately to hold it together. It's not been easy. It's not been easy because I am not of the privileged select group that will not be affected immediately and in dangerous ways by all the nonsense going on by this racist regime in charge of the country right now. So if that's you, that's awesome. And you especially need to join the forces out here that are saying, we're not having this, we're not tolerating this, and we are not all white nationalists. And let me show you how different we are. All right. So there you go. Hang on to the line. Have faith. See you in the month.